dropped it on the floor. And instead of shattering into a million pieces, the glass actually bounced. This physical property of this chemically modified glass opened up a major R&D effort to find other ways at Corning to strengthen glass. And by 1962, 10 years later, they developed a product line called ChemCore, which found some initial traction. There was some initial customer interest in this capability, and they found initial applications in things like safety eyewear, prescription lenses, and automobile glass. The properties of the material were not perfect for glasses, and so that had a kind of a limited lifespan on the market. And automobile manufacturers quickly realized that while this material outperforms current safety specs, there was really no incentive to outperform current safety specs for automobile glass, and the price premium associated with it was really affecting their bottom line. So after receiving this type of market feedback, Corning discontinued the product line in 1971. We can flash forward to 2007. There's different accounts of what happened next, but one thing people is for sure is that Steve Jobs visited Corning Glass in 2007 and asked for a chemically strengthened glass material. Corning had kind of dusted off these formulations. They were experimenting with some penetration into the cell phone market to replace high impact plastic, but it really was a minor side project until Steve Jobs visited. Some people will say that he did not disclose the eventual application and the advent, or the envisioned advent and market penetration of the iPhone. But what did happen next is that Corning agreed to produce this chemically strengthened glass in mass quantities and shrinking the footprint of it from 4 millimeters in thickness to 1 millimeter. So in 2007, this amazing science breakthrough actually captured a significant amount of revenue. And if you flash forward today, as I mentioned, we are all interacting with this material on a daily basis. It's about 10% of global revenues for Corning Glass, and it's the major driver behind that revenue growth for year on year. So one of the major messages of today's presentation is that there's really steps that you can take to try to define what value your technology has, rather than spending a lot of time in the lab perfecting something that nobody might want for 30 or 40 years from now. And so the early stages of your fellowship are a really good place to start in order to be able to try to define this value before you get back into the lab and try to perfect features that you think may or may not be important. One way to approach this is to look at the value chain of the envisioned products that you're hoping to insert your technologies into. The value chain, this exercise and this process helps you identify competitive opportunities that might be out there. It's very similar to a supply chain, but it emphasizes kind of the services that get created at each step along the chain, and it puts it in the context of both the competitive marketplace and the value that each of those steps deliver. It can help you understand what your company wants you to be. For example, how complete of a solution that you want to or need to provide in order to capture the right amount of value to keep your business running. And it also can provide guidelines onto what types of market forces that you need to consider when trying to penetrate different beachheads. So starting points for this are your Activate applications. You all have specified different products or market areas that you think your technology has applications in. This is just taking a deeper dive into that and a serious look. And most importantly, the reason to do this now is that it really can guide the technology development that you have and make the most out of the resources and the time that you have to deliver new capabilities and new features. An example of this is a startup that I worked with for a couple of years. They had developed a process to imbibe standard textile yarns with active ingredients. So you can envision, you know, futuristic applications someday being like drug delivery directly to the skin. But the more immediate applications that they were targeting was pain relief. So competitive athletes, people that spend all day working on their feet, have serious problems with chronic pain. And instead of taking a pill or putting a cream on your body a few times a day, you could just more simply put on a pair of socks. This was a really compelling technology. We spent a lot of time convincing ourselves they had a solid value proposition, but their initial capitalization plan for that product line was to license their technology to overseas manufacturers that would then manufacture these yarns. When they took a more careful look at the value chain, they realized that 80 to 90% of finished garments value is created in the final steps of the process. And so they wanted a bigger piece of that pie. This working knowledge and decision that they made at the executive level shifted the focus of their R&D from perfecting formulations at the single yarn level to working and developing processes and protocols to make complete finished garments out of this capability. So similar to what Textile did and to what Corning probably should have done a little bit earlier on, creating this value chain diagram for the technologies that you're trying to commercialize has to be done without complete information. And for folks who have platform technologies, you know, this should be done for a variety of industries. I'll show you a more specific example of that, one that Beth Zotter, who spoke last week, put together based on the market space within biopolymers from seaweed. So there's different types of biopolymers that can be extracted from seaweed. One of them is alginate. And if you take a look at the series of processing steps that need to collect these materials, purify these materials, and then implement them into consumer products, you start to understand the context of the value chain there. And if you start to put numbers, rough orders of magnitude numbers around the price points that get achieved at every step in the value chain, you can start to see spaces, white spaces, where it makes sense to try to insert your particular technologies. Now, for highly vertically integrated industries, you'll see a single company try to control more of this value chain, and that kind of gives you information on where it would make sense to insert yourself. And it gives you also a landscape and understanding of the market opportunities that happen at each step along the way. So if your technology is entering a marketplace that has a near monopoly, for example, then it's best to position yourself with a lot of competitive industries in between. And the reason for that is that those competitive industries will drive down the costs that the monopoly enjoys, but there are opportunities typically to insert yourself a little bit earlier on. And the most important takeaway here really is that this type of analysis should be guiding your tech development. As I mentioned, in the case of Textile, it completely shifted the focus of their R&D and their investment dollars. And today they're actually selling products on the market. All of your technologies face these types of trade-offs, and it's not necessarily garment versus fiber, but it can be system performance over cost. It can be size and weight over operating lifetime. For data plays, it can be how competitive or complete an analysis that you need to do on that data set is in order to be able to extract the right amount of value. This will, of course, change over the course of the fellowship, but the best approach to take is to really just develop this initial hypothesis and go out into the market and talk to people, analyze what you learned, and make your best guesses on where your beachheads are, and be prepared also to pivot, not just your technology, but your envisioned application space. So I'm sure you've all done some forms of customer discovery, and this is really how you get to the bottom of what your value proposition actually is. The job that needs to be done in these interviews is really not selling your technology. It's not about convincing people that your technology is great. It's really extracting the information that you need to know in order to be able to assess your value proposition. These are some practices which can have a lot of positive feedback that we've established over the years. I'm sure that you have your own as well. If you want to take a minute and put some of those into the chat, I'm sure you have the opportunity to share among yourselves what you found works and what doesn't work. The way to approach these conversations is to try to keep them as informal as possible and conversational as possible. You want to be prepared to read what's happening in the room. So you want to see what people are reacting to, what they get excited about and what they don't get excited about. And so it's really helpful to have somebody along with you to take notes and write down as much information as possible for you to analyze later. It usually helps to break the ice in some kind of way. So take an interest in the person that you're talking to. You can do a quick LinkedIn scan of their profile and figure out what school they went to or how long they've been at their company, and asking some kind of warm-up questions around that can be really helpful in setting the tone and extracting the right information. If these are give and take conversations, those are very valuable in the sense that you have some market knowledge, you understand what your competitors are doing. To the extent that you can share information that's valuable to this person's business and the job that this person needs to do, it really sets the tone for getting the kind of information that you want back. Once you've established your initial hypothesis, this is a great place to test it. Put it out there and ask people if it resonates with them, get feedback on it, and allow them to help frame your thinking around it. It's also a good place to test assumptions. If you have some market numbers in mind or you have cost savings in mind, it's a good place to throw those numbers out and try to see if it makes sense and use these people as a sounding board. Most importantly, as I mentioned, you really want to read the person that you're speaking to. What are they excited about? What are they really frustrated about? Like, what keeps them up at night? This gets you to the problem set that you should be focused on solving, because it's pretty likely that there'll be value behind that. And don't be afraid of silence. It's pretty easy to be uncomfortable when somebody's not talking all the time, but that's the place where the person you're talking to will get a little bit uncomfortable and probably fill that space with information that you weren't expecting. So how do you gauge the outcomes of these conversations? Are they productive? Are they actionable? What do I do with this? Some early signs of what can be considered market traction are the fact that somebody's willing to have a second or third conversation with you. So if you're platform technology and looking to penetrate a variety of different market spaces, who's calling you back? Who's talking to you a second or third time? Are these people willing to commit something in terms of time, which has value, as well as materials? So samples for testing, a line for you to test your product on, those kind of things. Their reputation within the organization, are they willing to go to their boss and try to sell them on a larger scale pilot or initial joint development agreement or something like that? And the most importantly, of course, the bottom line is money. Are they willing to fund some type of demonstration to show how your technology could be inserted into their business in order to be able to add value? It's always helpful to know, where the budgets are and who controls those budgets. And it's always useful to ask anyone that you talk to, who else it is in the field or the area that you're targeting that that you should be talking to, and ask for warm introductions to those folks as well. So here's an example of what you can do with all that data once you've accumulated it. So you're talking about, you know, really almost a full-time job, talking to folks. How do you make sense of all the information that comes in? A company called Feasible in their earlier days put together this heat map. And this heat map is really just designed for several different value chains. So they could have inserted, they make a ultrasonic imaging, they were introducing a new ultrasonic imaging capability that could be used for battery diagnostics. And you can imagine there's many types of batteries out there in the world. There's many places to envision inserting yourself. And so their value diagrams encompassed a variety of different end products or end uses. They accumulated a lot of information from a lot of different people and generated this heat map as a way to track the markets they were getting the most initial traction into. And so the areas in red are the ones where people were most excited and they had the most potential follow-on opportunities come out of them. But the areas in green, you shouldn't think of as a waste of time, because that goes into your story pitch. That goes into what you're going to talk to your investors about when they ask you about these other areas. You'll be prepared to say why they weren't a particularly good fit for your technology. So having that excellent note-taking discipline and being able to read through and analyze the data and then generate the places visually, in this case visually, to be able to take a deeper dive into the markets you're trying to penetrate. And so now we'll get to the fun part of the day, which is getting to talk to Tina. But I just wanted to close with where I started, which is, you know, your goal here is to generate value from your technology. And the best way to get there is to talk to a lot of people along the way. So Tina, welcome. Thank you for coming. Hope you will give us a quick introduction to your background and your company's background and the technology that you're commercializing.
Yeah, of course. So I am Tina, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of RLS Bio. And we're engineering enzymes to manufacture unnatural chemicals. In particular, we are focused on unnatural amino acids, which are building blocks for all kinds of other bigger chemical and biological molecules. So they're in 10% of drugs, they're in agrochemicals, some of them are fluorescent probes, some can be surfactants and detergents. So it's a pretty broad class of molecules with a pretty broad scope of applications. I figured that since we're talking about this, let me share my screen for a second and I'll show you. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. Since we were talking about it, this is a slide that I made from a pitch competition we did recently. And this was kind of how I, in one slide, was expressing where we are and what our value is. So we are selling amino acids to pharmaceutical companies as our beachhead market. And the value that we're bringing is that our product is higher quality than other products that are available on the market, because our enzyme can only make one form of the product, and so it doesn't have the common contaminant. And you know, ideally, once our stuff's good, we'll be able to do it in like a quarter of the time. So right now, our customers, one of them has 5 people that work full time for 8 months to make a product that the enzyme can make overnight. It's also more sustainable, so we can reduce the waste, greenhouse gas emissions, and the energy. We can make new products that nobody has ever reported before, so they're not found in nature, and there aren't any known synthetic routes to access them, which is important to our customers who are trying to build new IP or find molecules that can bind to a particular drug target more tightly. And our process is also safer, and it's manufactured locally. which is important to some of our customers as well. So depending on the audience I'm talking to, these are just some like examples of how I try to think about our value. And this is all based, like Amy said, off customer feedback, things that people asked me, things that they were really, really passionate about or mentioned was a problem. Oh, and then I guess the other thing is that it's nice to have like quotes from customers if you can get them. So if you hear any zingers in your customer discovery, those are always nice to put on slides. But, that's what my my plot looks like, so you can see.
So Tina, what that we were just talking about kind of resonated with you, and what like don't you agree with and you found actually doesn't work?
I mean, I agree overall with what you're saying. So I think that the customer discovery, I think people kind of know at this point can't really be undervalued. I talked to a lot of people while I was still a postdoc when we were deciding whether or not to start the company, and then I've talked to a lot of people since then. I kind of operate under giving anybody that I can get my grubby mitts on. I'll talk to them for half an hour, and then you can usually tell from that meeting if you should invest more time in it based off whether they were enthusiastic about it, if they were asking good questions and holding a good conversation, or if they were kind of looking at the clock and ready to bail and get rid of you. But the customer interviews have actually been the basis for not just understanding the market, but for a lot of our other successes. So all of the, I think over half of the customers that we have now are actually people I just met through customer discovery, and I was talking to them more casually. And then they said, oh, well, if you can make this thing, I'd be interested in getting it. And so we were able to work from there. It's also a really good place to find conference invites to speak, to find advisors or other champions. So we found somebody who is a business development director at one of the major manufacturing companies that we're selling into. And he just really, this is something he's been thinking about, it's something he's really excited about. And so he's invited me to speak at conferences. He got me into the loop for the secret meetings that all of the I don't know, people who've been in the industry for a while and all really know each other, where they hang out. It turned out there's a small conference in Boulder where anybody who's anybody goes for a week to hang out with all their friends and talk about science. And so he made me aware of that and made sure that I got invited. And so I think it can have a lot of unexpected benefits in addition to just the getting your house in order.
And we have a question from Tom.
No questions from Tom. Well, I guess it's been.
Tom asked you enough questions already.
Well, I think this is a broadly applicable question. So this is why I think it's probably worth asking, which is about the value chain analysis, right? You know, you have a lot of options for monetizing your tech. You could sell enzymes, you could sell amino acids, you could license tech, you could sell services, and it may be different for different markets. So just broadly speaking, where's your head now around where you sit in the value chain? And is it different for different market segments that you're looking at?
Yeah, so this is the like good and bad of the platform technology. I have a lot of options about what we could sell and who we could sell it to, but then I also have to sort through all of that, which is a big slew of data to be thinking about. For what we're doing right now, we are in the early middle of the value chain. So before us is people that are selling more commodity chemicals, so the materials for media, for chemical synthesis, solvents, consumables, all this other stuff that just kind of goes into manufacturing our product. Then we are selling to people who are making peptides. And so that can be people in R&D, people making approved drugs, contract manufacturers. We don't necessarily distinguish where they are exactly, but we're giving them this amino acid so that then they can make a higher value peptide. And then at the end of this R&D manufacturing chain, it goes up to approved drugs where they're going to have the most value. We decided to be where we are because this is the portion of the value chain that our technology right now is good at, and so we can get started right away. And if you go even one step above us, they have to deal with a lot more regulatory requirements. So a lot of GMP certifications and site visits and batch records and all this, whereas we're right before all of that kicks in. And so we're making less of the overall value, but we don't have all that extra headache. And we also fit into a more niche sector of the amino acids. So you can get standard amino acids for $25 a kilogram. They're just everywhere. You can get them from natural sources, but we can sell to $20,000 a kilogram, or at really high volumes, the lowest it goes is $3,000 to $5,000 a kilogram. So it's still a pretty high value market relatively. It does change as we go into other segments. For the most part, what we're thinking about now is still selling the amino acid to somebody who's going to make something else of it. But we're also kind of keeping our options open, in that when we're working with these customers, I can see what are they using the product for, what's their internal process for finding something new, for developing it. And so we can sort of learn from them at the same time, so that in the future we have the option, if we wanted to be more vertically integrated or something, that's on the table, but it's not where we're focused right now.
Tina, along those lines, how did you think about setting initial pricing?
Yeah, this is something that Tom and I have had a lot of conversations about. I am a big fan of like spreadsheets and data frames. So I have spreadsheets for all kinds of stuff. I have one where I went through and scoured the internet for what people were selling that was either the same or similar to what I had, so that I could have an idea of what kind of the going rate was that people would be comfortable with. And of course, I talk to customers. But for a lot of things, I kind of sit and I think of a number and I say it. And then if the customer immediately, instantaneously agrees and is very happy, then I know next time I should make it higher. And if they look at me like I'm insane, then I should probably make it lower. And it is sort of a, throwing spaghetti at the wall, where I know kind of approximately what range we're looking at, but especially because we can make a bunch of different chemicals, then that expected price point changes based off the particular molecule and the scale that it's at. So it is a certain amount of a guessing game that I haven't entirely figured out. But as Tom in all of his wisdom has told me, initially when I was doing this exercise, I was picking numbers that were way too low, because I still, struggle to account for time as having any value. And Tom was like, multiply by 2, multiply by 3. And I did that and people didn't even blink. So I think, go up of what you're thinking, and probably they're going to pay it. And if they're not, they'll probably come back to negotiate. It's not like it's a, one and done situation if it's something that somebody's actually interested in.
And it looks like we have a question from Josue.
Yeah, I was curious. I couldn't tell. Are you currently manufacturing multiple products or just one? Because you mentioned something about multiple items.
Yeah, so it depends how you count a product. So right now we are selling things that look like the amino acid tryptophan, but we can make like 100 different things that look like tryptophan. And so the kind of back end process of what we're doing doesn't change very much if you want 4-fluorotryptophan or beta-propyltryptophan, because we don't have to have one enzyme to make one product. We can use an enzyme to make a bunch of different products. So a lot of the tech development, preparing stocks, optimizing things for scale, if I do that for one product, it works for the rest of these products. But we are in the future going to have to expand even further to where we'll have to work with different enzymes or molecules that are going to have different properties and require more R&D. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess that also informs my next question, because I think as you grow, I imagine you'll have different scales of customers, different products you'll be making. Have you kind of seen, I think you mentioned it before about the different value of specific byproducts, but also are your customers interacting with the product in the same way in terms of decision-making unit, or the way that they're thinking of it taking in your product? Because I imagine the scales, the processes for themselves look very different, and how you approach that analysis.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, for our product, selling into this kind of pharmaceutical peptide synthesis, people want everything from gram quantities to hundreds of kilograms. And so we do have to kind of run that gamut. And there's different decision making. So at the smaller scale, people just basically care if they can get their hands on it. The prices that we're talking about, even if I charge $2,000 a gram, that's just not a big deal because it's just for R&D. They're only getting a little bit of all these different molecules. So for them, they care more about, can I get it and can I get it now? And so that's something where, having things in stock or getting out to the customers that are specifically doing that work, it doesn't have a whole decision-making tree because it is so low stakes. So usually the scientists can just order it themselves. So if you can convince them that this is cool, they'll just buy it and try it out. That doesn't mean though that it's going to go any farther than that small purchase, but it might, right? And so that's sort of the price that I think we're paying, is that it's a certain amount of kind of small revenue. We can put things we can make a big container of amino acid and parse it out into a small, medium, and large container and sell it to everybody, but not all of those are going to, bring recurring revenue. For the mid-level, which I would say is like a kilogram, that's actually where we can make the most bang for our bucks. We can sell it for like $20,000 a kilogram. And there's a much smaller subsection of customers that are getting to this point. It's mostly people that are going into clinical trials. And so at that point, they still don't care about a lot of the supply chain logistics and things that'll matter to them later, but it's starting to be a bigger purchase. And so usually there's a department lead or a project lead that, again, you have to convince wants this. And then when you get to the really big scale, that's where we're talking to companies that are preparing for drugs that are in late stage clinical trials that they want to manufacture. And so then it's much more of a process. We submit a proposal. For example, we just did one where we had to submit a proposal about what we thought it would cost, what we would do to prove that we could make it, and what the timeline is and all that. But for the most part, the customers, like I haven't had to go out and solicit to all of those different people, though I've talked to all those different types of people during customer discovery, because through that customer discovery process, they came to me. They now know that we exist, and so when they have a project that needs something like this, they say, oh yeah, I talked to that weird girl and she was gonna make this for me. So I haven't had to do that forced outreach for acquiring customers.
Thanks.
And we have another question from Chris.
Yeah, so my question is kind of, there's lots of potential products that one could make. And long term, there's probably some sort of large market that you're going after, or you have a particular vision for the company. And I guess the question is, how do you select early products that help, like how do you think about early products and how it helps you get the company to the next stage or somewhere farther along where you're not doing what you're doing now, potentially?
Yeah. Good question, for which I guess there's like a multi-part answer. So first, I kind of let the customers tell me what I should be doing. And so if somebody comes to me and says, I need this quantity at this purity or something, okay, well then if I hear that a couple times, that's probably, a market segment where if $5 million of requests came in without me doing anything, there's probably more if I go out there and actually like look for it, right? And so that's like a good place to start. I also try to think about if I develop something for this product, will it help me if I had to do something that was similar but not the same? So for example, right now we're focused a lot on scale up. We just hired a fermentation engineer and bought a bunch of bioreactors and chemical reactors and all this other stuff, because I'm figuring that if we learn to do this scale up process and work out the kinks for one process, one product, that it may not be 100% transferable, but that will still be a skill set that we have that we can hopefully smooth the way as we go to do something else. And so, if I'm going to a product or if I'm going to a market after my beachhead, it's probably going to be something that requires me to do things at a larger scale and a lower price. So this will not be time wasted. The other thing to decide is that I think about who is asking me to do something. And if there's a customer that, you know, maybe knows a lot and has a good reputation that could either help me get other customers because they can vouch for me, or with VCs or something, then I'm more likely to do something for them. Or if it's a customer that's willing to kind of have some give and take and help teach us how to navigate certain, you know, business roadblocks. Like I had to learn what a TSCA form was recently, and I had never even heard of this. I didn't know how to fill it out or what to put. But the company that we're working with was like, it's okay, we'll help you understand what needs to happen. So now I know for the future, and that was like a good thing to figure out. So it's sort of a matrix of all of those things. It's not like I have a hard rule, but I don't just do things that sound cool. It has to have some other more, I don't know, long-term potential benefit.
And I think our next question is going to go to Tom Mahoney.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you're looking at which customers to go after, which markets, how much like does it go, like, sorry, how do I phrase this? Like, you're thinking about like what competitors you have also, I guess, in terms of, and the market size, like how much does that come into your calculation?
Yeah, so that's definitely an important part of the calculation. I guess that for us, there's not really a like straight competitor. So the way, because we can make these hundreds of molecules that could theoretically go to hundreds of places, there's lots of companies that are doing parts of that. But it's not like there's a natural amino acid manufacturing company that's trying to do the same stuff. So through customer discovery, we're seeing that there's that gap here, right? Where the customers can't get this thing that they want to get. And so that tells me that there's not good competition. Like there may be other people out there that are making it, but they're not meeting what the customers need. And so they're dead to me. But I do definitely like try to think about that if there's, okay, so for example, I've been looking lately at some agrochemicals, and there's some natural amino acids that are used as biostimulants. You like spray them on the leaves to help the plant grow. But within this market, there's a couple of unnatural amino acids that people have already, like they're already on the market, already being manufactured at really big scale. And when I look at their process, they're already doing a good job, right? And so the amount of time I would have to spend to like eke out that incremental advance, I don't think it's worth it. If I can find these other sections that maybe it's not the biggest part of the market, but it's still respectable, right? And that's where I could have that kind of like time and money benefit exchange. So when I do my market, like Sankey diagrams, I don't know if you guys have seen those, but I'm all about those now. But if I say, okay, this total addressable market is $1 billion, but I know that 300 million of that is for these products that are sort of spoken for, then I just like remove those from my math entirely. Because that's not something that I'm probably gonna be able to get. So if I'm trying to decide where to point that technology, it's not there.
And next up, we have Grayson.
Hi, Tina. Thanks so much for your time. Just a quick question, since we're working on a platform technology too. Something I struggle with a lot is how much time to spend in one area. You know, like when do you know, okay, this is either the one I want to go after, or I should just move on to the next market segment. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you think about that. And it sounds like you have a super clear beachhead now. How you got certain about that?
I feel your pain very much. If anybody wants to come to my quarterly meeting tomorrow at 10, this is going to be one of the hot topics that I wanted to talk about, so you can hear what other people have to say too. Yeah, this is something that I still definitely like struggle with. Is, you know, is it better to make more, I guess, products, right? More, Tom says SKUs within the same market, or is it better to take what I already have and apply it to as many places as possible? And I do not have a clear answer for you. As for how we decided for this beachhead, I guess it was a mixture of, this is where my mind was at, I guess, when I first started, because I come from a like chemical biology, pharmaceutical background. I worked at Amgen. I already was sort of aware that this was a problem, at least in the highest regard. And so then that's where I knew the most people, to talk to the most people, to try to like figure all of this out. And that's definitely, I think, an important factor as well. It shouldn't, like, if you think you have a good idea, that shouldn't be the deciding factor. You can get friends, hire consultants, do whatever to get that knowledge in other areas. But it's definitely easier to think about the problems for a market that you already have some familiarity with how the system works and how they do their R&D and manufacturing and all of that, just to even know who to talk to and where to get started. What Robert suggested to me was that if I do this sort of high level market analysis, so I have a big fat Sankey diagram with lots of different options, and I tried to do like 5 customer discovery interviews in each sector, just kind of asking the like very high level live or die questions. And so it didn't even necessarily matter that I was talking to the like best people, just somebody who knew something. And I was like, okay, well, how much of this do you buy? You know, can you get it now? How much are you selling for? What's the problem? Is there a problem? And just get that like really high level information. So, you know, I talked to some people in nutraceuticals, which is an area that, you know, amino acids are pretty prevalent. When I talked to a reputable source, he was saying that, oh, nutraceuticals have basically the same regulatory hurdles as like a clinically approved drugs. They have to go through clinical trials to show that they have a more medicinal effect in addition to being edible. And that was something that I didn't know. So then I could put that on the back burner. I was like, well, I'm not going to clinical trials right now. So like, maybe I can work with somebody in the future, but like, it's not where I'm focusing. And then, yeah, Robert suggested that if we have like a beachhead, then maybe like the Series A or something, we can budget for some consultants or whoever that may be knowledgeable in those areas to get some help, because it is so time consuming. Like I spent almost a month just doing the like high level market analysis for all of the places the amino acids could go. And I'm still only like hand wavy levels of confident about the TAM, right? It just takes forever.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. Yeah.
And we'll head back to Josue.
So thanks, Tina. I'm kind of curious more about the next problem you're encountering in terms of, you know, where to focus your energy. And I'm curious whether you've thought of like lifetime value of a customer as a model to try to estimate, see like, as you engage different customers, whether it's the R&D scale or kind of the bigger production, if those, like you could try to extrapolate kind of what they're worth over a number of years. I'm not sure if you're like starting to see those trends, and if you're starting to use that as a framework. Yeah, I guess that's one question.
That's a good idea. I haven't done that quantitatively, but I've done that, I guess, like qualitatively, in that I get a lot of messages from like professors who say, will you make me 1 gram of this for my study? And it's not a study that I think is like going to showcase my tech in a better way. It's not going to make me any money. It's just going to be like a headache for kind of nothing. Then I say no. But I do consider the lifetime value when I say yes, right? For if there's a pharmaceutical company where we're going to do a like $25,000 deal to do some basically R&D proof of concept stuff. But it's something where this could be 100 kilograms a year later, and they're telling me that they have other stuff in the pipeline that could be going through a similar process. So like, I'm going to bend over backwards for them, right? Because that is, like you're saying, something that could have a much larger lifetime value financially, in addition to the reputation and all those other benefits that can come from working with somebody. But yeah, I haven't tried to quantify it, but it seems like a good metric.
Because I guess what question I have is whether you could dice up your beachhead into more smaller beachheads, right? Like if you could say the R&D customers think of this way and have this scale, the larger scale pharmaceuticals usually order these thousands of kilograms of supply. I'm wondering if like that's where you're going now in terms of like your beachhead is actually composed of more beachheads.
Yeah, I guess that depending on how you slice it, that definitely could be the case. I guess I think about it as like peptide developers and manufacturers as being one, because it is more almost like a continuum in that they feed into each other. So if, for example, I right now can make 100 grams of material. I can send it out to whoever, right? So yeah, I can work with these R&D companies, whatever. But a lot of those companies won't work with me if I'm not working towards making 100 kilograms, because their goal is to make this at scale if everything goes well. And so part of the problem is that you can get another contract manufacturer to make small, medium quantities of this, but then they hit this, when they go to clinical trials to the kind of kilogram scale, they can't get it. And so they don't even want to consider a weird amino acid in their R&D if they can't get it later. And so I am able to like make some revenue now by just selling to these like small, medium ones, but I'm working on deals that are pushing towards that higher end, because it's all, yeah, going to be together, right? It's all, you can't just like parse out the revenue into just one piece. So.
Got it. Sure. Thanks.
And Jeff has a question.
Yeah, hi Christina, thanks for doing this. For your kind of R&D little pilot programs with big companies, did you ever run into IP issues? I assume they will want to own some, whatever new thing you develop for them, do they get to own it? Or was this a contentious thing for you? Or I'm curious what your general terms are or advice for this, so you don't lose everything to them.
Good question. So I'll start by recommending Nikhil's work on the CIPA, the Quotation for Collaborative Services, and I forget what CIPA actually stands for, but basically legal documents that you can append to POs or whatever to outline some of those common terms. For IP, the line that we've sort of drawn is, these are my enzymes, even if I made it in working for you. And so you don't get any exclusivity, you don't get any IP on that. But then when I give you the amino acid, anything you make after that is yours. So if they're making a peptide drug, that's their peptide drug. And I don't have to necessarily care about the IP, because if I am the best supplier for it, they're still going to have to come to me to get it. And my customer base is very particular about having IP on the final drug. They really, really do not want to pay royalties or anything back to suppliers. And so it's basically like a non-starter. So I protect the enzyme and I protect I don't give any rights away for the molecules that we're making. There are some cases where they've asked to pay extra for exclusivity to a particular molecule. I haven't agreed to that yet, but I may at some point, because I basically want to keep our options as open as possible, but there's no IP transfer.
If anyone else has a question, we probably have time for one or two more. Get them in there.
You know, I'm curious how your early customer discovery what kind of impact it had on your tech development path. What you learned there that may have affected sort of where you were investing your time and resources on the technology side.
Yeah. So yeah, at first I thought that we would be making all kinds of really weird, crazy molecules, but only on a, I don't know, less than 100 gram scale, basically kind of catalog style. I was like, well, people that are doing medicinal chemistry, they want to be able to get all of these weird amino acids so they can try to make a good drug. And great, there's so many drug companies in the world that are doing that. It's going to be no problem. But that is still, you know, a part of what we're doing. But after talking to people, I saw, you know, that there's a lot more of this focus on scale up, on having this more, I don't know, holistic supply chain where they don't have to keep sourcing it again and again and again as they go through this process. And so for us, it's been, yeah, scale up, like the customers requested, quality control. Right now, we've been relying on a lot of our customers to do quality control. And I guess I'll also put this like segue in here. If you're sending stuff to customers, I would say always ask for money, even if it's just a little bit of money, because that shows they're serious, but also try to think about things that aren't just money that they can do for you. So we always get back any data that they collected on my molecule, they have to give to me. Once they put it into the peptide or whatever, just like we were talking before, that's their molecule and I don't get to know about that. But it's been really good for us to get that QC validation where we're running some tests and we think that what we made is good, but it's not as rigorous as what they're doing. And so that's been like a good sanity check, that we're not totally off base, but also to see what it is they care about, what they're testing. And that backed up what I heard through customer discovery, talking to people about kind of the specs they were looking for. And like customers that are interested will give away like happily a lot of information. Like people sent me the methods they use on their instruments to do quality control, and people sent me the specification sheets with all their information for what they wanted at scale. And so if you just ask and if there's something that's important, if you're annoying, you just keep asking. Like we got a lot of information that way.
And I think our final question then is going to go to Sherry.
Hey, Tina. I was curious how your customer interactions have impacted your interactions with investors. Because I think there's like a danger here that an investor could look at what you're selling now and sort of infer a value ceiling on what you might be worth later. There's also the benefit of, you have a product that you're actually selling, so you've demonstrated demand. And so I wonder like how you have talked about your customer interactions with investors in order to have it increase your value and not be seen as like a limitation on your potential future value.
Yeah, so I have raised $1 million on Safe Notes so far, but if you again come to quarterly, we're going to talk about what I should be doing to prepare for whatever comes next. So far, the investors have heavily favored, you have revenue and customer traction, and so that means you're going places. Like it hasn't any more than just, I don't know, that you have to be able to project where your company's going and what you're doing, just like you always do. There hasn't been any specific concern related to, I don't know, the type of work I'm doing and for what customers I'm doing it. One thing that I have found people like is I've been trying to work on establishing basically the base case. So I'm like, okay, in pharmaceuticals, based off this customer interaction and whatever assumptions, market information we have, I think I could make X amount of money. But that's just like to start with, right? So if that's already a pretty good number, then you can also imagine there's a lot of optionality. And so it can only kind of get better from there, right? And so if that base case looks appealing for whatever it be like a short-term plan or a long-term plan, then they like that there's that flexibility. If for whatever reason the market changes in 3 years, right, that's okay, I can sell somewhere else. Or, if I'm able to get this other harder piece of the tech online, great. Like we were already making good money, now we'll make better money. But having the customers be able to vouch that those numbers are not insane, and being able to just say like, look, it's not a bunch of money, right? Okay, I think that by the end of this year, we'll have brought in like $100,000, right? That's not paying the bills, but it still showed that people gave enough of a crap to give me money, right? And they like that.
All right, well, I think that we are at time, so we'll wrap it up there. But let's thank Amy and Christina with some, digital silent applause. Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was really great, and it was so great to see so many of you interacting and asking questions. And so we'll be back same time, same place next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tina.
Thanks, everyone.